Hello, I'm Larry Taylor. I'm a registered parliamentarian and one of the founders of the Cascadia study group of parliamentary procedure within the National Association of Parliamentarians. Today's video is on the topic of recalls and removals when the romance is over and you need to end the relationship. If in an organization, when we always have the happy path and we love our leadership and they're doing the will of the people and things are great, you don't have to worry about this kind of stuff. But sometimes you find yourself with a overbearing leader who uses Robert's Rules of Order as a tool to bash you and to control you, as opposed to a leader that enables you. So this is what you do when you find yourself in those circumstances. I looked up the DEFCON levels, and they kind of roughly corresponded to the levels of escalation that you go through in Robert's Rules of Order when you find yourself in this situation. So you have DEFCON 5, which is your lowest state of readiness, all the way to DEFCON 1, which is nuclear war is imminent. And we will go through all the stages on how to get there, because there's a progression that you follow when you come into a circumstance like this. So the response levels inside of Robert's Rules of Order, there's DEFCON 5, which is know your rights. DEFCON 4, which is the point of order, which is kind of your hammer or screwdriver in your toolkit. DEFCON 3 is appeal the ruling of the chair, which is not used that often, but really could be. And then there's DEFCON 2, which is a temporary removal of a presiding officer. And then there's DEFCON 1, which is removal from office. So DEFCON 5 is the one that we're all trying to work on, so that we all know that our rights inside of meetings. What you find is that assemblies that is comprised of people that do not know their rights are easy victims to rule abuse. If your presiding officer or their parliamentarian know that they are dealing with knowledgeable members, then there is more of an inclination. There is less of an the inclination to abuse the rules is diminished. You find that they don't take liberty with the rules when they know that there's someone watching them and they can call them on it, because it's kind of embarrassing to be called on the rules. So the basic thing that we all need to do is understand our rights, so that when they are abused, and even if they are inadvertently abused, you can correct things, because we all like everything to be fair and equal, and that's when meetings are best run. DEFCON 4 is point of order. This is your basic tool when something goes awry, that you as a member of the assembly can invoke. So when a member thinks that the rules of the assembly are being violated, they can make a point of order, thereby calling upon the chair for a ruling and enforcement of the regular rules. So the characteristics of point of order. So it takes precedence over any pending question out of which it may arise, which is really high. It does not yield to any subsidiary motion, and it can be applied to any breach of the Assembly's rules. This includes breaches of decorum. So if you find yourself in a meeting where someone is doing a personal attack, that is not allowed, and so it is well within your rights to say, point of order, I call the member to order, and they need to knock that off. Characteristics of a point of order: it is an order when another has the floor, which is really interesting, because someone could be talking, but if there is an infraction going on, especially by the speaker, you are empowered to interrupt, and you just you stand up and you say point of order. If you are in a large meeting with a microphone, then you state that at the microphone. It does not require a second. So if you see something that is not being done correctly, you can say point of order, and you do not need to wait for a second. The chair has to respond to you. It is not debatable, but it does become debatable if the chair refers it to the assembly during the appeal process, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. It is not amendable, and it is normally ruled upon by the chair, and it cannot be reconsidered. So you can't say point of order, blah, 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 and the chair does a ruling, and then someone else says, that ruling is incorrect, or we can reconsider it. Can't do all that. So you have basically one shot at appealing the ruling of the chair and getting a decision from the assembly. The grounds for a point of order. So it is the right of every member who notices a breach of the rules to insist on their enforcement. If a question of order is to be raised, it must be raised promptly at the time the breach occurs. Points of order regarding the conduct of a vote must be raised immediately following the announcement of the voting result. So it's really not cool to have a vote on something, especially an election, and then wait a day or two and then have objections to what went on. You really have to object to it during the meeting when everyone is there and you can all talk about what happened. So there's breaches of a continuing nature. So this is when something is going on continuously outside of a regular meeting. A point of order can be made at any time during the continuance of a breach of a continuing nature. Examples: when a made motion adopted that conflicts with the bylaws, any action taken in violation of applicable procedural rules and federal, state, or local law. We've got some very interesting researches going on about who can vote in meetings, and those would be examples of breaches of a continuing nature. And so at the next regular meeting, we can bring those up and have those discussed. In all such cases of a continuing breach, it is never too late to raise a point of order, since any action so taken is null and void. So the way to start the process is say point of order. That leads to DEFCON 3, which is appeal the decision of the chair. I've only seen this done once at a state central committee, and the chair walked up to the person who made the appeal, and he basically thundered, "You're appealing a ruling of the chair," which is not cool. And the poor person who appealed it immediately backed down and they didn't proceed. He really should have stood his ground and gone through the process. But the whole basis of doing an appeal is that by electing a presiding officer, the Assembly delegates to them the authority and duty to make necessary rulings on questions of parliamentary law. This prevents everyone from being the parliamentarian making rulings. You've got a presiding officer that is running the meeting, and so you're entrusting them to do the right thing. And so this is what you do when you think that they've not done the right thing. Any two members have the right to appeal from the presiding officer's decision on such a question. So by one member making the appeal and another member seconding it, the question is then taken from the chair and vested in the Assembly for the final decision. This sort of reinforces the whole concept of the ultimate authority being the body. So a majority of the Assembly is the ultimate authority in the group. It's not the chair. And so when a chair makes a ruling that is incorrect, if there's any ambiguity over whether the chair's decision is right, this is the process you follow to move it back to the Assembly, and they make the ultimate decision. An appeal can be applied to any ruling by the presiding officer, with a few exceptions. An appeal is in order when another has the floor, but the appeal must be made at the time of the ruling. If debate or business has intervened, it is too late to appeal. So when you say point of order, blah, 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 and the chair says, I'm sorry, the point is not well taken, that's when you say that that is your opportunity to express the sentiment that you disagree with the ruling of the chair, and you say the words, "I appeal the ruling of the chair," which then invokes this set of processes. Appeals are generally debatable. No member may speak more than once. The presiding officer may speak at the beginning and the closing of the debate and answer questions. Appeals are not amendable, and a majority or tie vote sustains the decision of the chair. So again, the process happens in this sequence. If say I say point of order, the chair says, "What's your point of order?" And I say, the previous motion was out of order for blah, blah, blah. And the chair says, point not well taken. And then I say, I appeal the ruling of the chair. Then the chair says that the ruling of the chair has been appealed. And so we will take a vote on this. And then the chair has the opportunity to speak first, and they say why they have ruled the way they did. And then everyone in the Assembly has one opportunity to speak. And then the chair has a final opportunity to wrap up. They can say, after hearing all this, I tend to agree with you. Or they can say, I'm not moved in my opinion, and my decision still stands. And then you take, the chair conducts a vote, and it takes a majority to overturn the chair. So a yes sustains the ruling of the chair, and a no does not. A no means no, you don't agree with the ruling of the chair and you're voting against it. The final note is, if a member disagrees with the ruling of a chair affecting any substantial question, they should not hesitate to appeal. The situation is no more delicate than disagreeing with another member in debate. Everyone thinks that, oh, you're affronting the sensibilities of the chair if you appeal the ruling. It's like, no, you're not. You're just saying that you're disagreeing with them and you want the assembly to make the decision. The presiding officers often welcome an appeal because it relieves them of the responsibility in a strongly contested situation. So the chair on their own can also move decisions to the assembly if they so want. And as Robert's Rule says, it's sometimes they like that because then they're not the bad guy. It's the assembly that's made the decision. And since the majority rules, then that's what you do. Again, the question of an appeal is, shall the ruling of the presiding officer be sustained? A tie or majority, yes, yay vote sustains the ruling. A no vote overturns the ruling. And the principle behind this is that the chair's decision stands until reversed by a majority. DEFCON 2, temporarily removing a presiding officer. So there's two ways to go about this. There's temporarily removing it during this current session, and then there's permanent removal, which is the last process we'll go through. Temporary removal is described in page 650, starting in 650 of Robert's Rules of Order. If the chair at a meeting acts improperly, a point of order may be raised, and from that chair's decision an appeal, which we just talked about. This enables the majority to ensure enforcement of the rules unless the chair ignores the point of order, ignores the appeal, or fails to act in accordance with the assembly's decision on the appeal. So say the chair sees this resolution coming up that they don't want it, that the chair doesn't want to talk about, and you challenge them and you say, point of order, that resolution has followed all the proper steps and can be brought before the assembly, and the chair thinks, no, this is just too sensitive and we're gonna offend somebody and we're not gonna do it. That's when you appeal the ruling of the chair, and when they then rule that the resolution will not be brought before the assembly, then you appeal that ruling. And then if the majority still decides that you can bring the resolution before the body and the chair refuses to bring it, that's when you can temporarily remove the chair. So when a point of order is ignored, if the chair ignores a point of order that is not dilatory, the member can repeat the point of order a second and a third time. And if the chair still ignores it, the member standing in his place can immediately put the point of order to a vote without debate. So this is when the chair fails to put the vote to the assembly, and you said, point of order, you need to do this, point of order, it's the magic 3 times. If they don't do it, then you, the member who raised the appeal, can then, from your standing position in front of the mic or however you are in the meeting, you can conduct the vote yourself. You take the vote out of the hands of the chair and you conduct the vote yourself because the chair has started to fail to follow the rules. So, example, the question may be put as, is the point of order that, XYZ was well taken, and conduct the vote of the assembly. Likewise, if the appeal is ignored 3 times without the member may put the appeal to a vote without debate. And such a question may be put as, shall the decision of the chair be sustained? So if you're going to go do this, then you probably should review this section of Robert's Rules so you get the whole scenario clear in your mind before you embark upon it. But yes, you can do this as a member of an assembly. If the chair fails to act in accordance with the assembly's decision on an appeal or a point of order, or otherwise fails to perform the duties of the chair properly in a meeting, the assembly may employ measures temporarily to replace the chair with another presiding officer. So notice the line, or otherwise fails to perform the duties of the chair properly in a meeting. So this opens it up to more broadly than just ignoring a point of order. So the way this is done is that you make a motion to suspend the rules so as to take away from the chair the authority to preside during all or part of the session. You don't have to cite any specific rule for this. You say, I move to suspend the rules and remove the chair. When such a motion is made and seconded, after stating the motion, they must turn the chair over to another person. So the chair doesn't get to preside over this activity. The remedy for refusal or failure to do so, that the motion may be put to it. The remedy for refusal or failure to do so is that the motion may be put to a vote by its maker. So you've suspended the rules and the chair is resisting even to acknowledge the fact that you have called for the rules to be suspended for the removal. That doesn't mean that you stop. You can actually conduct the vote yourself. Any motion to suspend the rules during the meeting can remain in effect at most for one session. So if you do this, it lasts for the balance of the meeting. To continue preventing the officer from presiding would require a motion to suspend the rules, be renewed, and separately adopted at each of the sessions. So if you have a standing committee where you have you've had it with the chair has been incompetent or abusive or whatever, and you have decided that you can no longer deal with the chair, you can remove them for that session. And then at the next regular meeting, you can also remove them, but that would be your first order of business. After they've been removed, then who's ever the next ranking presiding officer then would take over. And the final one is DEFCON 1, the nuclear option, removing from office. This is a process that everyone is kind of uncomfortable with because it really is the nuclear option, and it tends to be divisive. But sometimes this is what you have to do if the downside of retaining the chair is greater than the benefit. So except as the bylaws may provide otherwise, any regular elected official of a permanent society can be removed from office by the society's assembly as follows. So notice that there's two cases here. One case is there are bylaws for the organization that govern this process, and then you should follow them. If the bylaws don't have a provision for recall, then you default to this process within Robert's Rules of Order. There's actually two cases of this, and it depends on how the chair was elected or whatever officer you're targeting. If the bylaws provide that the officer shall serve for X number of years or until their successors are elected, the officer in question can be removed from office by adoption of a motion to do so. So this is the simpler case. You just say, I move that we remove the such and such an officer from their position, and it requires a 2/3 vote to pass, or a majority vote with prior notice, or a majority vote of the membership. So if the membership is 200 people and you had 101 people vote for removal, then you don't even need a prior notice. You can do that. Typically, you have some number of people that don't attend, and so it's somewhat less than the full membership, but greater than a quorum, and so it's kind of hard to achieve. But the thing to know, though, is that a majority vote is only required with prior notice. The second case is if the bylaws provide that officers shall serve only for a fixed term, or they provide that officers serve for X number of years and until their successors are elected. The previous version was or. An officer can be removed from office for cause which is neglect of duty or misconduct in accordance with the procedures described in Robert's Rules section 63. So if this is how your officers are elected, then you have to follow this set of circumstances, and it would take more than just a motion from the floor to remove them. So I have an example in here, and this is using the bylaws of the Democratic Party of Oregon. This covers the elected officers, which is the chair, the two vice chairs, the secretary, and the 3 D&C members. Doesn't cover the treasurer because the treasurer is appointed. So, and this is typical of what you would find in your bylaws if it was covered. So in the DPO bylaws, it's Article 5, Section 5. The procedure for recalling any officer is as follows. The action is initiated by a petition specifying the gross misconduct or neglect of duty that is the basis of the recall and bears the signatures of 25 or more members, including at least 3 from each congressional district. So currently, Oregon has 5 congressional districts. You would need at least 3 signatures from each of the congressional districts plus the balance to equal 25 or more. And these are signatures of members of the State Central Committee. And notice that it cannot be for just anything. You really need to characterize the misconduct or neglect of duty that is the basis of the recall. As soon as practicable after the DPO receives a valid petition, the petitioners must mail notice of the recall petition to the officer involved by certified mail, return receipt requested. So old school delivery by the U.S. Post Office. The petitioners call a meeting of the State Central Committee and mail a notice of the meeting to the members of the State Central Committee. So this puts the onus on the petitioners to make the arrangements for the meeting. I'm sure you're not going to get any help from the officers, possibly, but then you need to make the arrangements for the meeting. You get to pick the location and find out what the prior notice requirements are and make sure that those are met when you send out the notice. And then you need to ensure that you have a quorum at the meeting. Part D, a copy of the petition must be included in the notice of the meeting and the provisional agenda. The petition must include a recall proposal and specified election of a successor to the office's items of business. So you need to have an agenda that includes, in addition to the removal of the officer, the election of the replacement. And so that implies that there's some organizing you'll need to do about lining up candidates to run for the office to replace them, because it would be awkward if you remove someone and didn't have anyone to fill it in. If the petitioners do not mail the notice of the recall petition at least 20 days before the date of the meeting at which the vote is scheduled to be taken, the recall petition may not be considered. This is just a reiteration of the prior notice requirement. It doesn't really add anything else to it. And a motion to grant the petition or to recall an officer must be carried by a 2/3 majority. So same as in the basic Robert's Rules of Order, you would have 2/3 of the people who attended the meeting to vote for the recall, and you have to have a quorum. Excuse me. The minimum required to succeed. So right now there's about 170 members of the State Central Committee. A quorum would be 68, and then you have the requirement that at least one member be there from each congressional district. A 2/3 vote of 68 is 45. So any of the DPO officers could be potentially removed by as few as 45 votes. It all depends on who makes it to the meeting. And of course, all the regular rules governing the meeting apply. So any delegate who doesn't attend can be replaced with an alternate delegate until you get your quorum established. So that's the process to follow for recalling someone. It would be best to sit down and map out all the things you need to do to make sure that you're following the rules and everything is done correctly, and that you have a good solid case in order to justify what's probably going to be a traumatic change. There are other things that can happen inside a meeting besides removal, and those are disciplinary procedures. So an assembly has the ultimate right to make and enforce its own rules and to require that its members refrain from conduct injurious to the organization or its purposes. So apart from someone being a presiding officer or an officer in the organization who's being abusive, you can also apply parts of Robert's Rules of Order to people that are just not behaving properly. Punishments generally fall under the headings of a censure, a suspension, or an expulsion. Of course, these are qualified. So in the Democratic Party of Oregon, where like precinct committee persons are elected, you can't throw them out of the party. You actually have to go through a recall process to remove them. It's my understanding it's different for an appointed precinct committee person because they were not elected. And so if you have appointed someone, you can rescind the appointment. Cases of conduct subject to disciplinary action divide into offenses occurring in a meeting and then offenses by members occurring outside of a meeting. So within a meeting, the chair or any member, so as a member, you do not have to put up with this. You can call a member to order. That's the 17th century version of the lingo that you invoke. The chair has no authority to impose a penalty. The assembly has this power. So the chair can call a member to order, such as if someone is making personal attacks on the floor or discussing the motives driving someone's argument or their behavior. You cannot talk about people's motives. All you can talk about are the ideas and concepts under debate. But the assembly has the power to administer a punishment. The declaration made by the chair in naming a member is addressed to the offender by name and in the second person and is entered into the minutes. So what gets entered into the minutes, and this is one of the areas where it's a little bit more than just the actions that happened to a motion, the minutes should include what the person was saying. So if you have someone ascribing, fraudulent intent for whatever they're proposing, the language used by the offending member gets recorded in the minutes so that you can recall it later if a discussion about that continues. Any member can move to order a penalty. So you can order to make an apology, that they be censured, that they require to leave the hall during the remainder of the meeting. So you say, I move that the member called to order apologize to the speaker for the accusations that they made in the meeting. And then you would vote on the motion, and if a majority agreed, then that's what that person would have to do. You can also order them to leave the meeting. The offending member may be required to leave the meeting during the consideration of their penalty, but they should first be allowed to present their defense briefly. So if they were ascribing motives to someone's actions, then they can defend their words. But if the assembly agrees that they need to leave the meeting for the balance of the discussion, so it can be done with some level of confidentiality, you can do that. It gets a little dicier if things happen other than in a meeting. If disciplinary action is to be taken on improper conduct by a member elsewhere than in a meeting, charges must be preferred and a formal trial be held before the assembly of the society or before a standing or special committee, which should be required to report its findings and recommendations to the assembly for action. So you might have a standing committee that would take care of this kind of activity. If you don't, then the chair can appoint an ad hoc committee to conduct what they refer to as a trial, where you talk to both parties and you understand the details of what transpired, and come up with a recommendation on what should be done about this. And this is all in Robert's Rules, chapter 20. So if you have a problem in Oregon, and we've been having increasing problems within the Democratic Party of Oregon of things being handled less than professionally sometimes. This has gone on since 2016, and we're at the point where it can no longer transpire. And so as an interim solution, we have a process for reporting harassment and abuse. So if you go to the website PDPO, which stands for Progressive Democrats, there is a button on there for reporting harassment and abuse. So you can go out there and you can say what happened to you, and that will go to into our database. And what we will do is we will research it and advise on how to proceed. And this can be either at the Democratic Party itself or at the county level. So if you are being harassed or abused inside of a county party, and you don't know your rights, what we can do is help you understand your rights and help you take whatever action that needs to remediate it, because no one should be subjected to unprofessional behavior inside a volunteer organization. There is no faster way to destroy an organization than to let this kind of stuff go on and fester, which is basically what has been happening. We have to all work together. and do it in a professional manner. And there is no place for people treating other people egregiously. Is there any questions from the line, John?
Not that I see right now. Just a few people chatting about this and saying thank you very much for providing this information because it's important.
Excellent. So coming up, we have a new program that we're going to be starting up in May called Parliamentary Talk. The show is called Parliamentary Talk, and the website is parliamentarytalk.org. This is similar to Car Talk, if you remember Click and Clack from NPR, or the other show, which is lesser known, but almost as interesting, Philosophy Talk, where they talk about, in Philosophy Talk, they talk about the various conundrums that you come across in philosophy. What we are going to do in this program is take problems, real life problems from people, and then talk about how you would approach them in resolving them. And sometimes we, if possible, we could bring the submitter onto the line and talk further about their situation and then give them solutions. And so examples of this, people wonder, well, when do I come across parliamentary procedures? But any organization that is run as a democratic institution at some level is governed by parliamentary procedure and Robert's Rules of Order. So if you have a downtown neighborhood association, fascinating, interesting stuff going on in downtown Portland with their group, they tried to have elections last year, but they didn't have a quorum, and so they postponed them. And then the membership wanted to have an election, and for whatever reason, the leadership didn't want to conduct it. And so those are the kinds of things where you come across problems and you don't know how to grapple with them, and you don't know what your rights are and what you can demand. And so we can walk you through that. Another common situation would be like a PTA meeting, or if you belong to a sorority that's got some kind of a group, or any of the county parties of the Democratic Party of Oregon, or even the Republican Party, we will help you out as well. If you are having your rights trampled upon, we would be glad to entertain it, because it's also an opportunity for us to learn more about the subject matter and how to deal with these situations. So you can click the button at the top for submitting your question, and we will get it scheduled into a program. If you would like to receive notification of upcoming shows of Parliamentary Talk, you can subscribe to it on the lower left. And then if you would like to join the virtual study group, Cascadia, we would love to have you join us. So just click on the lower right-hand button, tell us who you are, and we will get you invited into the next meeting. And so if you don't know, the Cascadia E-Unit is an organized unit within the National Association of Parliamentarians. It is also associated with the Oregon Association of Parliamentarians. And the intention is to provide a way to study parliamentary procedure in Oregon outside of the Portland metro area. There are 3 groups that meet in the Portland metro area September through May, but there's nobody that really helps the thousands of people who live outside of the metro area. We do have members of the Oregon Association of Parliamentarians in all the corners of the state. There's some in Pendleton, and there's some in Medford, and of course some along the I-5 corridor. But this is a way for you to learn the material and practice the material and take it as far as you would like. Your membership's options inside the Cascadia unit, you can become a member. There's a quiz administered by the National Association of Parliamentarians. And so you take their quiz, which is 40 questions, and pass it, and then you can become a full-fledged member. You can become a provisional member. That's without actually passing the test, but joining to be a member and receive notices and participate in the meetings. And then you're a provisional member until you pass the quiz and become an actual member. There's scholarships available, so there is a nominal fee of $5 to join the group, but the The president of the Oregon Association of Parliamentarians has offered scholarships to anyone for which the fees are a barrier to joining. So in addition to the fees for the group, there's also the fees to the National Association of Parliamentarians, and that's where the scholarship kicks in. And that's on a sliding scale. So as you progress through the year, the joining fees are less because you're joining for less than a year. And then any current member of the National Association of Parliamentarians can administer the exams. So if you want to proceed further in your studies, you can become a registered parliamentarian. Currently, the process to do that requires passing 5 exams. They are beta testing a more human process for becoming a registered parliamentarian, and that will probably kick in next year. I haven't heard an actual release date when they're going to transition from the 5 exams to that process, but that's coming up. And if you want to sign up, please do so either at Parliamentary Talk or at another website called pdpo.org. And then your reference materials for studying parliamentary procedure. We have the book on the left, which is your edition, your 11th edition of Robert's Rules of Order. It now comes in at something like 750 pages. I was at a garage sale yesterday and picked up a version from about 2 decades ago, which was only 200 pages long. So it's been filled out substantially since then. The only book you should need for passing the entrance exam is Robert's Rules of Order in brief, which people can read in a day. So by just reading through that book, you should be able to pass the entrance exam. And then if you're really serious about becoming a registered parliamentarian, you can get the full study guide to the NAP registration exam, which gives you all 1,200 possible questions that could be asked, but is really invaluable for studying the material because it really gets into the fine nuances of Robert's Rules. And by the time you have passed that, you have a good foundational understanding of democracy and parliamentary procedure. Thank you for joining us in this, and I hope you've enjoyed the program. You are always welcome to go to parliamentarytalk.org if you have questions you'd like to pose to us. Thank you very much.